In 1974, Richard Easterlin, who is a professor of economics at UPenn, he came up with what's called the Easterlin paradox. Now, if you don't know that term, odds are you know the idea. The Easterlin paradox says that as standard of living increases, relative and perceived happiness decreases. It just says there's an inverse relationship between standard of living and happiness, which is really interesting, right? Because I think the belief that many of us have, or that many of us at least were told growing up, it's kind of the American dream, right? Is that the more money you have, the better your standard of living is, well, the better your life will be. And in some way, there's something like very human, deep in the human condition about that. Like if I can just get to that next level, if I can just have a little bit more, if I can just have what they have, then I will be happy. But to summarize the Easterlin paradox in a way that some others of you may understand, it's like the words of Biggie Smalls, that eminent scholar and theologian. Mo money, mo problems. You know, that was a cheap joke. Sorry. Admittedly, it was low-hanging fruit. What am I supposed to do? But there's a deep truth there. But the real question is not that that's true, because it does seem to be the case. The real question is why. Why is it that mo money equals mo problems? Why is it that as standard of living increases, perceived happiness does not? Researchers had some different ideas for it. Easterlin himself thought that it might be comparison, that if somebody's always got more than you, or somebody's always got something nicer than you. There's always going to be someone with a nicer car, or a nicer boat, or a nicer private jet, whatever it may be. And so as our standard of living increases, then we're more aware of what other people have that we do not. That was one of the ideas there. Jean Twenge, who is an author, a researcher, a psychologist, a professor, I think, at the University of San Diego, could be wrong on that, but you can fact check me on it. She actually has a different take on it. She says that much of the reason that happiness is not increasing, and is in fact decreasing in the Western world today, has a lot to do with technology. That as digital technology and just the availability of it increases, well, we're spending less time in things that made human life worth living for, I don't know, all of human history. Things like meaningful face-to-face social interactions, things like spending time outside. That as we spend more time glued to our devices, we lose sight of what really matters. Whatever it may be, I think one of the fascinating things is that in the midst of that you have Jesus. Jesus who lived in a very different kind of society. Jesus who wasn't poor, but he also wasn't super wealthy either. He was very normal person, you know? Jesus who says that I came that you might have life and life abundantly. Jesus who says that if you believe in me, then you will have joy. If you do my work, my words and my works, then my joy will be in you and your joy will be complete. Jesus says that if you believe in me and you receive the Spirit, then love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness will just come out of you as a natural result of your life. Jesus, whose kingdom is a kingdom of righteousness, joy, and peace in the Holy Spirit. And I think the real struggle for us is that, we just don't know how to get that in a world that just has no resources for pointing us to the kinds of things that Jesus is talking about here. And so there again, it's my question, right? Is what do we do about this? How do we actually enter into the kind of life that Jesus is available for his followers? Because I think then the other side of it is that for many people who are Christians, many people who would say they're followers of Jesus, our lives just don't reflect the kind of life that Jesus makes available to us, or says he makes available. We don't know what to do with it. And so part of what we've been talking about in this series, talking about our way of life, our rule of life, talking about being intentional, talking about Sabbath, is that we've really been saying that your life or your life system or your way of life is perfectly designed to get you the results that you're getting. And so if you're not happy with the way that your life is, if you're not happy with what you're feeling and experiencing on a daily basis, on a consistent basis, then maybe the thing that needs to change is not simply external circumstances. Maybe the thing that needs to change is what's going on in you. Maybe what you need to do is to make some changes to your life and your lifestyle to allow God to be present in the center of your life. So that's what we've been looking at. We started with this idea of paying attention. I'm just going to summarize some of this in this video. I think it'll be helpful for us. We start with the idea of paying attention, that what you pay attention to is the person you become. And the first act of love, Dallas Willard says, is the giving of attention. So if we want to talk about loving God, if we want to talk about loving neighbors, if we even want to talk about loving ourselves, then you must pay attention. You have to pay attention to God. You have to pay attention to your neighbor. You have to pay attention to what's going on inside you and not simply distract yourself into oblivion. We then talked about that idea of way of life, that how you structure your life gets you the results that you're getting in life. And then we brought in the idea of rule of life. And a rule of life, all it is just, it's the way that you're living your life, right? But doing so intentionally. Where you're intentionally, I mean the Christian tradition anyway, where I am intentionally centering my life on God and His kingdom. I am restructuring my life around following Jesus. Now that has all sorts of implications about how you do all sorts of things. How you wake up in the morning, how you go to bed at night, how you spend your days, who you spend your days with, what you eat or what you don't eat, what you drink or what you don't drink, how often you nap or do not nap, whether or not you take Sabbath or not. Because I think of all these things that we've talked about, Sabbath is one really important means of grace, which is just a channel of God's power into our life. Sabbath is just taking a 24-hour day off, and when you look at the teaching of Jesus, it's more than just a day off. I mean, this is a day of real rest. Jesus said the Sabbath was made for you. You weren't made for the Sabbath. And when you look at what Jesus does on the Sabbath, you see all throughout the Gospels, Jesus does a lot of healing on the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was made for you, and it was made for a day of healing. And so if you're looking for one place to make some adjustments in your rule of life, your way of life, Sabbath keeping may just be one important part of that. Not all of it, but it might be an important part of it. And to kind of close this out, I wanted to think about a story from Luke 13 where Jesus is in the synagogue teaching, and there's a woman there that we're told she's been physically, spiritually crippled for 18 years. Jesus sees her, he calls her forward, he says to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmities." She stands up, she praises God, and the synagogue leader who's there, you find this in Luke 13 verses 14 to 15, the synagogue leader who's there is mad at Jesus because he heals on the Sabbath, but he yells at the people and says, "Why are you coming here to be healed on the Sabbath? There's 6 other days for healing, come on those days." And Jesus responds by telling a very short parable. He says, "You hypocrites, don't you untie your ox or your donkey on the Sabbath and lead it out to water? Then why should I not untie this woman who's been bound for 18 years, this daughter of Abraham, on the Sabbath as well?" And sometimes when we hear that, and you'll see a lot of people interpret this passage, Luke 13, verse 14 to 15, and beyond, it's like 10 to 17, I think. But we interpret this passage more so as like, okay, Jesus is saying that you can do work by leading your donkey out to water on the Sabbath, so why can't he do work by healing someone on the Sabbath? But it's actually completely missing Jesus' point. Jesus' point is, you, the synagogue leader, lead your donkey out to water. You untie them and lead them to water. I, the master, untie this woman and lead her to living water. Now, the donkey's not doing any work, is it, in the first part of the story? The ox is not doing any work, is it, in the first part of the story? In the second, he's saying, then neither is it this woman's fault. You're yelling at these people for showing up on the Sabbath and expecting healing, but that's exactly what they should be doing, Jesus says. He says, I am the one who's doing the work. The master is the one who unties them and leads them to life and to flourishing and to healing, not them. And so just to summarize it, now a lot of this we've talked about taking responsibility and being very conscious about how you're living your life and being intentional and restructuring and rule of life and practices and disciplines and rhythms and routines and all that stuff. And it's really good. But the one thing that I want you to not hear is that it is all on you to make this work. Now you have some role to play, but it's not your responsibility to be healed. Jesus is the one who will bring you healing. Our job is simply to show up and posture ourselves in such a way that we are prepared to receive what he has for us. And ultimately this, I think it's as simple as this. All the donkey brings to that equation in Jesus' parable is that it's thirsty. I think all we need to bring to the table at a very deep level is just a hunger and thirst. And this is the beautiful truth of the gospel. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, for they will be satisfied, Jesus said. So if there's anything that we can do for you guys, please do reach out and let us know. We love you. We're praying for you. Let us know how this series has been helpful for you as we've been talking about way of life and some things like that. If you got any questions, go ahead and drop those in the comments or reach out and let us know. Love to hear from you guys. It's always helpful for us and hopefully helpful for you too. So in the meantime, if this was helpful, you can like it. You can subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so. Share it with a friend if that's cool and they like that stuff and they want to hear my cheesy mo money, mo problem jokes. I'll be using that one all week, for weeks, for years maybe. But y'all take care, make a great day, and we'll see you next time.